Well, behind the every object we use lies an unseen journey where today's choice quietly becomes tomorrow's impact. Every cup, every cloth, every click, every bite, each carries a hidden story that shapes our shared tomorrow. So, hello viewers, very good evening to all of you. Hope you all are fine and healthy. This is Shobhan, your host. Welcome to today's global event in association with the Wheels Global Foundation, where we uncover the hidden truth about the life of everyday things and discover how today's action create tomorrow's impact. So let's take a journey of beyond the ordinary. But before we proceed, let us explore how NDLI is bridging the digital divide, reshaping the digital learning ecosystem, and fostering an inclusive learning community. Well, NDLI, it's an initiative by the Ministry of Education. It's a knowledge asset. It stands a driving force of education, research innovation, and a knowledge sharing across the nation. Designed a single window platform, it makes the learning and educational resources accessible to the learners from every demographic by connecting digital repositories from India around the world. Initiated a pilot project in 2015, NDLI was envisioned to integrate the digitized educational content and provide seamless access through the unified platform. The NDLI portal officially though launched nationwide on 19th of June 2018, marking it's a significant milestone in digital learning. Following the successful completion of phase 1 and phase 2, now the Ministry of Education launched its phase 3 in April 2021 to further strengthening the NDLI's mission to bridge the digital divide and foster an inclusive and empower the learning community. However, to access NDLI, there are two ways. You can access through browser by URL address ndl.gov.in or ndl.iidkgp.ac.in. Similarly, you can install the Android and iOS versions of applications from the respective Play stores. So if we look at the glimpse of the NDLI at the moment, now we have more than 14.5 crore of resources, out of which national license contents are more than 6.5 lakhs, and the contents providers are from various 650 plus providers. Users across 1 crore plus and set up more than 7.2k club around the nations. Currently, we provide the cloud hosting, more than 31 institutions, remote assistance to more than 150 plus education institutions simultaneously, especially the smaller institutes who are so passionate to retrieve their own educational resources. It's NDLI to help them to assist them implementation and installations for their own IDR or institutional digital repository system. So these all are the NDLI services still that we are offering, like NDLI website and applications, NDLI Club, institutional digital repository, as I mentioned, idea support service, digital preservations and documentation, institutional digital library service, and some training and awareness services as well. So NDLI Club actually one of the most premium services and online platform for creating, conducting an activity based learning platform. Its objective actually, it's an initiative aimed to fostering the culture of reading, learning, knowledge sharing by utilizing the vast resources available through NDLI. Functioning its online platform for learning oriented activities, the club itself encourage all the members and students to actively engage in academic and skill based events through various workshops or discussions. With these collaborative activities, students are able to strengthen their core competency and sharpening their skills and develop essential personality traits for their overall growth and future success. So inward actually, they are before they are entering to the job market, they all become a team leader or the market leader itself. So actually, with these all are the datas, the datas the till date. The club actually distributed in such way. Maharashtra, however, become the top contributor, and especially the southern parts of the nation. So western parts of the nation and the southern part of the nations are the top contributors in DLI clubs across the nations. So till date at the moment, 971 events and workshop we have converted. Out of this, 850 plus online sessions, 80 plus offline sessions, 4 international workshop, 5 national workshop, and 32 institutional digital repository workshop to enlighten and to empower the learning community across the nation. So these all are the awards and accolades we received till date, like WSA winner 2021 and the winner of James Digital Library in 2019 and 2024, the successive, the 2 times we have received, and all of the respective awards we have received throughout the data. So with NDLI, actually knowledge becomes a bridge that helps us to learn, share wisdom, and grow as a community. With NDLI, we learn beyond the boundaries, share beyond the differences, and grow beyond the imagination. So I request and urge to everyone, just learn the resources and share amongst the friends and the family member so we can grow together. So with this, I just quickly move to introduce our today's moderator. So let me introduce, and it's a privilege to introduce our today's event moderator, Sujata ma'am, a distinguished leader whose journey exemplifies the excellence, dedication, services. Sujata ma'am is a board member of Wills Global Foundation in India, chairperson. It's an East chapters. So thank you, ma'am, for joining with us for yet another exciting session. So Sujata ma'am actually began her academic pursuit with MSc in physics from IIT Kharagpur, followed by a postgraduate degree in computer science from ISI Kolkata. And to further strengthen her professional expertise, she earned a certificate of quality analyst credentials from the Quality Assurance Institute USA. Her career spans decades in corporate IT sectors where she worked with the leading private and multinational organizations, culminating in her role in general manager at IBM before her retirement. Yet retirement was not an end, but it's a new beginning for her. Sujata ma'am has since devoted herself to IIT alumni initiative of voluntary activities, giving back to the society and the nation. Her leadership extended to the National Digital Library of India too, where she served as a chief operating officer for 8 years, playing a pivotal role in shaping one of India's most impactful digital education platform. Currently, as I mentioned earlier, she continues to inspire us as a board member of Wills Global Foundation India and chairperson of its East chapter, driving initiative that blend technology, education, and social responsibility. So, ma'am, thank you again for joining with us. Now the stage is yours.
Thank you, Shohun, for that kind introduction. I'm really humbled. Uh, I do feel privileged to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Prasad Modak. Dr. Modak, he's an eminent environmental engineer with over 4 decades of global experience. He earned degrees from IIT Bombay and AIT Bangkok. He began his career again at IIT Bombay in 1984 and later founded the Environmental Management Center Private Limited in 1996 and then eConnect Knowledge Foundation in 2012. He's worked with leading UN agencies and global institutions like UNEP, UNDP, World Bank, ADB, and many others, advising governments worldwide. In India, he contributed to key national committees on sustainable procurement, waste management, and circular economy. Dr. Modak is also a prolific author. He's published widely, contributed to UNEP reports, edited journals, and highlighted sustainability through his latest book, The ESG Nexus From Silos to Synergy, which was published only this year. Dr. Modak has also been internationally recognized through the AITA Distinguished Alumni Award in 2010 and Lifetime Achievement Award from IICQM. He currently co-chairs the Sustainability Council of Wheels Global Foundation, and that is where our steps crossed. So welcome to the event, Dr. Prasad Modak, and we do look forward to listening to you and getting enriched over the next 1 hour or so over sustainable practices that we need to follow. You're not audible, Dr. Modak. You need to unmute. Yes, thank you.
Is that okay now? So I was just saying thank you, Sujata,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the introduction. And also, I feel privileged to be able to contribute to NDLI. Very impressive institution indeed. And today's topic, which we decided to speak, is also exciting. And I really hope that we have interesting discussions at the end of this presentation. So the topic is, of course, as the Sovan talked about, it's a hidden life of everyday things. What your T-shirt, your coffee cup, what you drink, the phone you may use, and even the burger you may eat, never tell you the full story. So I'm happy here,
Yes.
Sujata, and let's roll out a conversation.
Sure, sure. Okay, before we start the conversation, here is a message for the audience. As we go through the session, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and our speaker will be answering those at the end of the session. Okay, so coming to the main part. Prasad, as you said, the topic of today, the hidden life of everyday things, that seems very interesting. Looks like there's a lot of hidden stuff actually behind it. But the second line is more intriguing. What your t-shirt, coffee, phone, and burger never told you. So I'm just thinking, maybe just a thought, all of us, we interact with dozens of products every day without even thinking twice. So, what could be the single most shocking thing that we don't know about the things that we are actually using or owning? Your thoughts, please?
Yes, thanks, Sujata. This opens up an interesting conversation. And in fact, as you start questioning this, that what is the product, what I'm buying or using, what's the footprint of that product? What's the rucksack of that product? What's the life cycle impact of that product? Gives a very different understanding to give signals on how do we consume, how do we select our products, what impacts do they make across the life cycle. So, for example, you bought a T-shirt. Of course, you know its price, but do we really know what it took from the natural resources and what kind of impact is it leading to? Every product carries a hidden story. There is some consumption of water, there is some consumption of energy, use of land, labor, and generation of waste, which we have to think about. In fact, what Sujata happens is you need to really go beyond what you see at the present, but think about the whole life cycle of that product. So we often begin with some raw materials, then we process. Of course, there's a transportation involved, we manufacture, then distribute these products that you and I use. And after use, it becomes a stage of end of life of that product. Of course, we got to figure out what do we do with it. But ideally speaking, we should be exploring how can that end of life can give rise to a new life so that it cuts down our raw material consumption. So let me return back to the example of the T-shirt that we started with. It's astonishing when you look at just a cotton T-shirt. It consumes typically 2,700 liters for making one T-shirt. And that is something equivalent to what a person drinks in 2.5 years. It has 200 grams average of pesticides, and that is coming out from the cotton farming as an average. And in making that t-shirt, the materials are getting transported average 8,000 kilometers. And that is going to spew a significant greenhouse gas emissions. But it's not just the make part of it. Even the use phase matters a lot. So one of the studies done by Levi Strauss indicated that if you line dry, cold wash, then you can cut down the t-shirt's lifetime carbon impact by half or 50%. So that's something, isn't it interesting to see that just a t-shirt has a lot of story to tell, how it was made and how it consumes resources during its use. I use the word sometimes, a phrase, these are all doves with tall shadows. Because these products, many of them, take for example, washing machine, the making part doesn't consume that much of energy and materials. But in the use phase of that washing machine, we really see something like 75% of the overall impact. You only see the price tag, but as you buy and especially use the use phase, you see there a big spike. And it tells you, therefore, that you got to be careful. Do you really want to use half loads? Can you not dry doing simple, what we normally used to do, line drying? You got to have time for that, of course, and try to use as much cold water as possible. So every product has this shadow. And if we know about it, then I think we may be a much more responsible consumer as well as the user of that product. But all this tells us to another interesting term. We call that as embodied water. Sometimes it's also called as virtual water. A tomato, for example, behind that tomato, we are consuming 13 liters of water. It goes up to the apple, 70 liters. A pint of beer is 170 liters. A glass of milk, 200 liters. A hamburger is 2,400. But 1 kilo of beef is 30,000 plus liters of water consumed. That means that water is embedded. We always say sometimes, what is per capita consumption of water as a way to know what's the water demand? But actually, it's not that. Several times more is the actual per capita generation consumption of water as embodied. So every product has a significant water footprint. That concept got extended to a term called rucksacking. And this is the hidden backpack every product carries. And Frederick Schmidt Bleek coined this term rucksack, where every product's invisible rucksack needs to be unfolded. A gold ring, 3,000 kilograms of mind waste. A laptop, 800 kilos of materials mobilized. And a mobile phone is 70 times of its own weight. So the rucksack understanding in scientific terms, what Frederick Schmidt Bleek did is that he coined the term material input per service unit, MIPS. And this came from the Wuppertal Institute in Germany. And the tables came out of different materials about their MIPS. And that gave a choice to the product maker. Even a lot in construction industry, that how do you use those products who have less rucksack, or as I said, less of the shadow. We talked about mobiles in the last slide. If you just look at the challenge we are facing today, the critical raw materials, actually it is leading us to a hidden mining crisis. There are 60 plus minerals in one smartphone. Most of them consist of cobalt. A lot of that comes from DRC, often involves labor by children. Lithium is another issue. We're going to see more and more extraction of lithium. And the rare earths, which are actually supporting the whole renewable energy industry, especially wind turbines and solar panels. So while we are all aiming at a green energy transition somewhat, we are shifting from essentially oil wells to mine shafts. So there is nothing like a silver bullet in solving the problem, right? We shift from one idea to another, but that also takes us to an issue. And even the digital world, sometimes we feel non physical entities will have less impact, but the digital world also has. So, all global emails, this is an interesting estimate, in 2025 led to 150 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. Well, the number is large, may not be too large in terms of a percentage, but it is almost the same as the aviation emissions from Germany. But I think the more worrisome part is the data centers, and I call them as new factories. There's a huge terawatt hours consumption happening. And data centers, I don't know, some of you are reading the last week news in the United States, is the state of Virginia is suffering from huge emissions of diesel generating sets, which are required to power up these data centers. So there are a lot of issues, even when we talk about the digital world. And let's put this case at the end, so to say. The AI, which is a part of our everyday life, you know, this is the Chat GPT 3 version statistics, but it tells you there's a huge consumption of electricity and water again each time you make an AI query. And that is somewhat, Sujata, conflicting. Sometimes we use AI to solve our sustainability challenges, but excessively, as we keep using AI for that, are we really solving the problem or creating some other problem? So let me stop here at the moment, Sujata. I hope it answers.
Okay. Oh, so you very well expanded on that word hidden. There's something that I was anticipating. So, and we can see there's really a lot of hidden stuff behind what we do or what we use. So you've shown us where products are coming from. Now, if I can ask maybe a harder question, where do they go? And finally, who pays the price for how they end? Your thoughts, please.
Yeah. So, the easiest way to think about it, that's once you use and abuse and throw the product, it's gone, it's out of sight. And we don't really much worry about where does it go and sit and how long does it sit and in what form. So this is what I call as an end game. What happens after we are done? Some numbers will definitely shock us. 1.3 billion tons of food waste is every year happening globally. It's such a huge quantum of food waste. 100 billion garments are produced annually, and 87% of them get landfilled or incinerated. You can imagine the kind of load which is going just to the landfills. We'll talk about it a little later, because one of the interesting reasons for this is also the fast fashions, and the movements to take back the used garments are not still very strong. 400 million tons of hazardous waste is generated globally, and 8 million tons of plastic waste enters oceans every year. These are, I will call them as numbers that definitely shock us. What is going to be the end game? We use a term here called end of life, and what happens after you throw it away. 60% here, the statistics is for plastic, goes to landfill. 13% is incinerated. Only 19% is recycled. And 8% is put back again in the second life through reuse and repair. So the real question comes that if you want to look at plastic economy as an example of all these kinds of numbers, did we design the end of life, or we should have been thinking about looking at the design problem as designing out the waste in the first place itself? I talked about fast fashion. In fact, it is an overconsumption machine. So if you look at the amount of garments as we change them every season or throw them away, you get a huge figure of 87% of garments going to the landfill or getting incinerated. And remember that this life cycle cost of fast fashion is paid by water, soil, and workers, not the price tag. Synthetic fibers take almost 200 years to biodegrade. So when they go and sit in the landfill, they're there. They're there for generations. So that's very, very scary. And it's also funny that you see the whole emergence which has happened of the marketplace, the digital marketplace. We are all, I think, I would say, compelled to use these platforms during COVID times. And a whole new industry came about, isn't it? Of people, when you give a call and you get your product delivered at your place. But sometimes the package of that product is far, far impacting. And just in the year 2025, the packages shipped by entire global parcel market was 407 billion tons. It's a huge figure to look at it. So we are in some way, through our consumption patterns, creating waste not just because of the products, but also because of the packaging. And that's something we have to remember, that the impacts are, we call this as a ripple effect, not just the product, but also the packaging. Of course, we got to think about, after the end of life, the second life. And what if the end of life is just the beginning of that life? So can we not reuse the old t-shirt or a used phone, or even coffee grounds, which are being considered for fertilizer as a mushroom separate substrate, skincare, and people are also looking at car batteries, which initially were used for electric vehicles. How can they be put back to use for home energy storage? So remember, design for second life is not charity. It is smart engineering. And that's what we got to start thinking about. But, taking your question, Sujata, a little bit ahead, because, everybody then wants to respond to say, let's recycle. Just recycle is a great idea. Of course, it's a great idea. We need to recycle. But the problem is not easy. Brominated flame retardants, we abbreviate them as BFRs, are added to plastic for good reasons, for fire safety, pretty effective. But they make potentially the plastic chemically toxic. So when you talk about recycling BFR, plastic contaminates into new products. I'm just giving you examples of children's toys, food packaging, household goods. You do that in good faith, but the poison travels with it. The systems insight we got to remember, therefore, that we got to not look at only recycling, but the entire material flow. The full life cycle cost of the contamination will be huge in terms of remediation, yield loss, so on and so forth, health effects. And this is ultimately not really priced or thought by the designer, producer, or distributor, but it is the price we pay as public. It goes to our environment, risk to health and the ecosystems. So there is a challenge. And end of life is an issue very much, Sujata. We got to start thinking about it. And that's where, as I said in the beginning, knowing the hidden life makes a lot of difference. Hope it answers.
Nice. Yeah, so that means the figures that you showed, they're really, really shocking. So when we are told, to go electric, buy organic, recycle, offset, it's as I could see in your presentation, it suggests that none of these are really what they seem, right? So are we being misled? Or is it that we are not asking the right questions?
I think you really put it straight. I think both things are there. We are kind of, under advertising, promotion, not, I would say we are not really well informed. But the second part is more important. We don't ask questions. And I think that's where we had to go. Because eco-friendly is a word you must have seen used everywhere. Everybody says we are eco-friendly. What does it mean? So it's a promise. But the life cycle assessment, which we do scientifically, is the proof. Because some people say eco-friendly here means natural, zero carbon. That word again is coming in. They sometimes say is eco-pack, sustainable. So these terminologies, you will see them appearing in millions of products. And there is not necessarily a quantitative or a life cycle based evidence behind them. So one of the movements, I must say, which was very laudable, which came about, was the whole concept of eco-labeling of products and have a scrutiny of that product done scientifically, and a label is then assigned, which informs the consumer that it is indeed eco-friendly because of the following reasons. So that is something as eco-labeling as a movement hasn't happened in our country. We don't really have today Indian eco label, which was there way back, formulated as eco mark, hasn't got much traction. If you compare that with some of the countries, even the neighborhood countries like Thailand, for example, of course the leaders are Korea, Japan, in the way they have brought the eco labeling concept to the consumer in their day-to-day life. So that's something. If not done, then we run into that problem of greenwashing, if I use that word. So, so this is the set of questions we have to keep asking. At what stage are you saying it is eco-friendly? It's compared to what alternative? And how is it measured? Is it only looking at carbon or GHG emissions, or looking at some different other important criteria? All these questions must be asked. Now, as we start digging deeper and start asking these questions, we find sometimes few things we always thought were eco-friendly are not necessarily eco-friendly in the system's perspective. Take palm oil as an example. It's a paradox. It's found today in 50% of the supermarket products. Most efficient, plant efficient vegetable oil crop, lower greenhouse gas emissions per liter than most alternatives, but its biodiversity footprint is a challenge. More than 27 million hectares of tropical forests have got cleared in the interest of plantations of palms. And you see a lot of extinction happening of the species, including threats to tigers and elephants displaced. Peatlands, that's important. They release a huge amount of carbon over time. So while the GHG number looks fine, the ecosystem impacts were catastrophic. So if you take a bigger picture, we have something here, numbers coming from the IPBES Business and Biodiversity Assessment. And the most report also shows that this is a great systemic risk to the global economy. Less than 1% of companies disclose their biodiversity impacts. And in 2023, this is interesting, $7.3 trillion of finance harmed the nature, and only $220 billion were allotted to protect it. So biodiversity is always compromised, I find. And this is important dimension when we talk about the word eco-friendly. Another paradox, is renewable energy really nature friendly? Well, we've been all, I would say, I can't say that word brainwash, but we've been always told that let's move to renewable on a scale. But look at solar, wind, hydro, biofuel, electric vehicles. There is always the other side of the coin. And sometimes I wonder what's going to happen if we solarize this country, bring lots of wind farms. Are we going to be missing some other hidden impacts? And by the way, they are no more hidden now. You can see them happening. And one of the big issues in all these, in solar and wind, is land. For wind, you have an issue of bird mortality, shadow flicker impacts, noise impacts. And in both cases, there is a huge land footprint. And we already see farmer protests happening because there's a huge piece of land which, of course, is negotiated and leased or sold. But yet, we have to remember that there is a significant social impact. Apart from the apart from the much talked term today, just transition, which is also an important social issue, as we transit to renewable energy more and more, we are going to definitely, not today immediately, but over a period, going to certainly see the challenges of a just transition. So, some people come and ask me that let's go net zero. That makes the whole world sustainable. Is that so? And I think I've maybe hopefully I've convinced you already that net zero world is not necessarily the sustainable world. Sustainability is multidimensional. It's not just climate, water, soil, biodiversity, and equity, ecosystems, livelihoods. So we should not let climate crowd out the rest of the sustainability agenda. And that's important because a net zero world could still have a biodiversity collapse, mining devastation, toxic chemical pollution, social inequity in energy transition, and water stress from digitalization. The way are going heavily is from those energy guzzlers and water guzzlers, the data centers. So, question comes that how are we how are we realizing these kinds of challenges when we talk about sustainability? So the multidimensional concepts, you see them coming from the sustainable development goals. In specific to our today's discussion, Sujata, the SDG 12 matters, which is the responsible consumption and production. And this is not about a sacrifice, it's about understanding. So when each of the targets and sub goals, when we look at sustainable management of natural resources, halving the food waste per capita by 2030, and so on and so forth. But the 12.8 is most important to me, which says ensure people have information for sustainable lifestyles. Now, here I must say that the program which was launched by the Prime Minister called LIFE is touching that 12.8. And I think if the action happens at the individual level, cumulatively, we would then see the change. And that's the spirit in which the SDG 12 has been framed up. What is it asking, really? First, understand the life cycle of what you buy. That means no. Select products with lower embodied impact. Choose. I think all of you now know the terms which I'm using, right? So use well, maximize use phase, examples, wash cold, repair, share, return, demand, which is important, ask brands for transparency and accountability, and the most important, inspire. Share this thinking with more than one person in your circles and influence them. That's where you see this word which is being talked about, circular economy. It's just opposite of take, make, throw away. Linear economy, which is most of it happening right now, is take, make, and dispose, and that gives the problem. Whereas in circularity, we think about the future, emphasizing right from design, keeping the products or the materials as long as possible in circulation, and where possible, regenerate and restore. It works basically on these four blocks of technical and what we say sometimes the biological cycle, where we talk about on the technical side reuse, repair, remanufacture, recycle, and we try to explore biological pathways by regeneration, composting, anaerobic digestion, using biochemicals. These are only illustrations, but it just tells you how things have to be now looked differently at the societal level, at the economy itself. One of the very interesting experiments which happened a couple of years back in Thailand was the biocircular green economy, the BCG model at the national level. We also have in India, Niti Aayog has come up with the circular economy action plans for 11 high priority sectors in the country. State of Gujarat has already made a circular economy action plan. You see similar ripples happening in Karnataka. So this to me, Sujata, is a fairly good awakening and actioning stage where we are now giving importance to circularity. And it's something which is not a topic in the conference. It's there in everyday life. These are the examples: Fairphone, Levi's waterless jeans, using up to 96% of less water. Patagonia, they are saying don't buy this jacket and hinting that repair, reuse, even rent. And you have IKEA has buyback schemes, old furniture returns to their stores. So these are not, as I said here, niche experiments. They are the new normal in the making. That's where we are all going, and we must go. So movements like zero waste, right to repair, buy nothing. By the way, there's a day, Sujata, called Buy Nothing Day. And people are urged not to buy on that day. So it's very interesting. Repair cafes. I think we saw the first one in Bangalore, but repair cafes are there everywhere now in Europe. A lot in the UK. There's a big traction.
Yes.
Slow fashion, another movement. Buy less, choose well, make it last. And even the rent, as I said, that's another big industry which we see coming up. Well, so to your question, Sujata, definitely few things are happening. There are few challenges. We still are in troubled waters of greenwashing. But I think there is a way out. Maybe we are there in the tunnel. There is some light and there is some hope. But for this, we all have to act together.
Correct. Right. And you're right, Prasad. Like lot of this has actually started happening. In India, maybe we are a little slow to catch up on this. But for example, right now I am in the UK, and it is so prevalent here. Like they have these repair cafes, they have this what they call charity shops where used dresses are brought in, and everybody comes in, buys them, goes back, wears them, and brings them back again, maybe. And it is not looked down upon. It's very much a part of the life. So maybe India is taking a while, but I'm hoping that we will catch up soon. Okay, so knowing all of this, the water that you talked about, the rucksacks, the greenwash, the biodiversity, what do you actually want the people who are in the audience today to do differently when they walk out of this session today?
All right. So a tough question, actually, if you ask me, Sujata, because many of the things what we are talking today have always been part of the Indian culture. If you revisit our
Yes.
traditions and the science behind those traditions, which are unspoken in some way, actually sometimes make me think that instead of to say the way forward, do we go back again to what we used to be? And the wisdom is perhaps there. The
Yes.
projections and documentations have happened a lot from the West. But I think the killer for us is the huge population, where we are not in a position now that traditional, I say sometimes traditional ecological knowledge is not just going to be sufficient. It has to be a huge mass movement. And that's what I think is the way forward. Let's start. Next time when you pick up something, ask where it comes from, ask where will it go. That is how, Sujata, you started the conversation.
Yes.
That is life cycle thinking. And that is the beginning of change. I do that when I'm talking to children. I do that when I'm talking to my granddaughters. Ask this question, makes them think, a pause, but it's required. There is something called Earth Overshoot Day. I don't know you heard about this term. It's a very interesting term where Overshoot Day marks the date in the calendar year where humanity has used more than from nature than the planet can renew in the entire year. So we have already crossed 1.7 Earths consumed globally each year. And the Earth Overshoot Day in 2024 was August. 2025 it is July. That means effective from July 1, we are borrowing, we are in the ecological debt, drawing from soil fertility, fish stocks, forest cover, what have you. But if I were to think about, like right now as we speak, I'm in Washington, D.C., and if I were to live life like an American, the 1.7 will become 5. And that talks about, the main message we are talking through the SDG 12. So remember, information was always there actually. Now, what do we do with that information is the most important question. So we have always known about embodied water since 1990s. We have had life cycle data on fast fashion for 2 decades. The Brundtland definition of sustainability is more than 40 years old. So the gap is not in the knowledge, it is in the transition from data to decision. And that translation is what is this part of what conversation we have today. So we have to move from that awareness stage to action as a consumer, as a citizen, as a professional. But these all small choices that we are going to make, and if we are multiplied by the population of this planet, is going to be a planetary scale change. There is also a question which comes here, and I don't want to get into that question at the moment, but just want to flag is the equity issue. And sufficiency is another question when it comes to whether people do have fair allocation of the resources in the first place. And then we talk about overconsumption, right? So there is a polarization that we have to think about. But the peaks of overconsumption are the ones which we have to address. So what did we actually promise at the famous 1972 Stockholm conference? We had a principle, everybody knows that we talk about the future generation, that we want to protect their interest and improve the environment. And that 1972 principle 1 of Stockholm Declaration was kind of operationalized in the Brundtland Commission of 1987 when we use the word our common future. It's such a powerful word, our common future. And that one line, which is very well known, sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. These definitions that we are seeing now, old, 50 years old, science has now deepened, but the commitment has not kept the pace. So what did the thinkers told us? The famous term, small is beautiful, from Schumacher. I like that phrase, small is beautiful, economics as if people matter. What Mahatma Gandhi said, he articulated the same truth without data, that Earth's resources suffice for need and not greed. And a life cycle principle express is a moral compact decades before life cycle thinking was formalized. This is amazing. And the data came later, the wisdom was always there. And I earlier did talk about our traditional ecological knowledge. So how much is enough? That's the question. Everybody must have that enough, and that's the equity issue. But every product starts with a decision, not just a design decision, a values decision. And here, Sujata, I will call upon all our startups, innovators. What we never see is the innovation impact assessment being done formally. It's just not there. So I just innovate and it is innovate. And I do not, at the same time, of course, there are benefits for which you innovate, but there are also shadows, as I was talking about. They have to be considered. Schumacher called that as a sufficiency. Gandhi called it as a need over greed. Stockholm called it as an intergenerational responsibility. Life cycle assessment gives us the numbers, but the question of enough is a question of character. So let me end now, Sujata, and I'll just list down what I thought should be the key messages coming from this talk. Every product has a hidden life. water, energy, land, chemicals, labor. The biggest impacts are often invisible. They are in manufacturing, they are in use, but definitely not at the checkout. Embodied water, rucksacking, life cycle thinking gives us the real picture. End of the life is a design decision. Products can be designed for a second life already. SDG 12 calls on all of us, producers, governments, consumers, to act differently. The circular economy is not a concept, it is the only model that we can sail, scale, end to end. Youth are not just the future, you are the signal that markets and governments follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Modak. I think that was so engrossing as well as eye opening. And I hope the audience here, especially the key messages that you shared at the end of it, they will take note of it and go back with at least some those thoughts in the mind. So you used also the words repair, reuse, recycle, and rethink. Before buying anything, please think twice. Do you really need it? In fact, if we go back to, you also mentioned in our traditional days in India, we were very used to reusing things, repair things, but now we are picking up the Western practices maybe and that fast design as you talked about. But let's think twice before we go and buy our next item, be it a mobile phone, be it a t-shirt, or be a cup of coffee or whatever. So thank you so very much once,
Pleasure.
Dr. Mose. It was really enlightening,
Thank
and
you.
I hope it will also be a good learning for the audience in here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would now like to hand over to Shobhan, who can take the questions that may have come from the audience.
Well, thank you, sir, for the powerful reminder that the objects we actually use for in daily uses, like our clothes, foods, phones, and even the digital activities, which carry hidden environmental costs, and rarely it's appear a price tag. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Let's take some questions what we have received today. Okay, it is Rig Bhattacharya who asked, how can recognizing embodied water and product rucksacks influence both consumer behavior, corporate responsibility?
You want to take the questions one by one, right? So I will just
Yes,
respond
yes,
to
sir.
this one. This is where Bhattacharya ji disclosure comes in. So imagine that if you had on the product label the life cycle impact listed out, and which is the practice with most of the eco labels and information disclosure about the products, then that is a touch point between you and the product maker. And that's where, when you are choosing from the shelf different items, you may not just use price as the criteria. And if you're really conscious about sustainability, you will use that information. That is the one how it will change the consumer behavior. We did there's something called Green Purchasing Network, International Green Purchasing Network, which I am on the council, and we did several studies to find out the consumer behavior when such an information is given. 10 years back, that information didn't make a difference. Price was the deciding criteria. Sometimes the attractiveness of packaging was the criteria. Sometimes just the brand and trusting in the brand was the criteria. Post-COVID, these surveys have shown now that the consumer now listens to that information and may change its mind and not take a decision solely on price. So it does take time to influence consumer behavior. And also, like you asked me, corporate responsibility, that we are making some progress, not so big at the moment. But if you ask me, more and more information disclosure happening, we will see more and more influence.
All right. Thank you. The next question from Sanjay. The question is, what hidden journey does a smartphone take before it reaches our hands?
So, Sanjoy, I mentioned in one of my slides that is typically a smartphone makes huge use of the critical minerals, and some of them which spike there are cobalt, molybdenum, and these need to be extracted from the mines. And when we talk about that, we are one depleting the critical mineral resource of the earth. The mining activity itself creates impacts, including health to the workers. And then you have, of course, the transportation related emissions apart from processing. So before the smartphone reaches you, it has a rucksack of all these material consumption and pollution release.
All right. Thank you, sir. Next and final questions. Some from Nanjudin, who asked, "How do we create awareness about the dangers of excess using in this consumer society?"
I think we got to use all the possible vehicles here. Talks like this, uh, I would say policy and guidelines, for example, on eco labeling to be made them stronger, more and more research, and more academic research which is independent, providing information on the impact of excessive uh, consumption. All these are the elements which are the touch points, that how do we bring that kind of awareness. I remember, um, and this is something some of you may like to check out later on, the Asian Productivity Organization every year has been organizing a green products fair. And if you go to their website, you'll see a publications after publications on the catalogs of these products. I remember attending several of these in different countries, but we also had one in New Delhi. And what was done was we brought together all the green product makers in an exhibition. And Sujata, this is something worth doing actually. And then people, when they were, going and looking around, each product maker was telling their story, why they are calling their product green. And I think that's another consumer movement, you can say. Uh, I used to talk a lot with the consumer education groups in the country. Very keen. They want to make use of this information to make the right choices. So huge opportunity. I would even go further and say it's an opportunity for several communication and sustainability professionals to look at this as an enterprise activity. Some of the brands are also looking at explaining their greener product better to the consumer, so they are also interested. So yes, awareness is something which we have to use all possible vehicles.
Well, thanks a lot, sir. And thank you, viewers, for raising the questions. Now, I'm requesting to Sujata ma'am to enlighten our viewers about Wills Global Foundation and the impactful work it is doing for the society.
Okay, Shobhan. So as you heard from him right at the beginning, today's event is conducted by the National Digital Library of India in collaboration with Wheels Global Foundation. So what is this Wheels Global Foundation? It's a not-for-profit organization created by the alumni of all the Indian Institutes of Technology. It was established in 2006 in response to a challenge from our late president, Dr. Abdul Kalam, when in a Pan IIT event, he had said, you all IITians, you've done so well for yourself. Now, why don't you do something to solve the big problems of India? And that is when many of the IITians, they came together and formed this organization. And the family has expanded its reach since then. And now, not only in IIT alumni, but we also have doctors, lawyers, and other professionals within our ambit. So, what's the objective? The objective is to engage the IIT system and alumni networks to drive technology based solutions to solve the problems of rural India in terms of water, health, energy, education, livelihoods, and in a sustainable manner. And that is how the name WHEELS has come up, WHWLS, all the parameters that touch our everyday life. So we are all volunteers here. We just try our best to give back a little, whatever small bit that we can towards the service of the nation. And right now, we have actually arrived at a target, at a mission of touching the lives of at least 20% of rural and underprivileged community of India by the year 2030. And we are positive that yes, we can do it, and not only just do it, but maybe we can exceed it. So that is what WHEELS Global Foundation is aiming at. Back to you, Shobhan.
Thank you, ma'am. So before we conclude, I'd like to extend, on the behalf of NDLI, our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Prasad Modak sir for enlightening us with this inspiring talk on the hidden life of everyday things. His insights really have helped both of us and our viewers too to understand the unseen impacts of everyday choices and encouraged us to think more responsibly and about the sustainability. And we also sincerely thank to Sujata Roy ma'am for moderating the entire event with such poise and clarity. Her guidance really ensured that the discussions remained engaging and the meaningful for all our viewers. And lastly, we sincerely appreciate our viewers across the globe who joined us today. Your presence and participations make the entire conversation, it's truly impactful, and together definitely we can carry forward the message of responsible living for a better future. So in this severe heat, I urge to all the viewers across the nation, please consume more water to stay dehydrated. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sir.
Shobhan.
Thank you, ma'am.
It was a pleasure also to join you on this event.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.